Well, I'm Darren Llewellyn, and I am the CEO of Llewellyn Technology, but I didn't always have such a fancy title. I started this company 20 years ago, and after we were doing about 3 years, my daughter, Amanda, our middle child, said, she's probably 8 or 9 years old at the time. She said, "Dad, you don't really have a real job, do you?" And I said, "No, I really don't have a real job." But I used to. Back when I had a real job, I worked in maintenance. For 10 years prior to starting this company, I worked in factory maintenance. I was an electrician, electronic repairman. I was assistant foreman. I was a maintenance superintendent. I was one of the guys that got called when the machines broke down. So for 10 years, I had a real job. And even before that, my dad had a machine shop and made me work from a very young age and told me I enjoyed it. So, so I had a real job. For those of you that have been out in the field, and I've seen we've got a lot of industries represented today. And have you noticed changes in electrical safety? Have you noticed things aren't like they used to be? And I did the math the other night, and I think it was like 28 years ago as an electrician in a factory in Terre Haute. And I know, I don't look that old, do I? Yeah. And it was amazing how things were then. And it was at Terre Haute, Malibu. Anybody heard of Terre Haute, Malibu manufacturing company? It was got somebody. It was 100 years old when I started. I worked there 4 months and quit. They closed within a year, and they couldn't live without me, you know. I went to night school at Ivy Tech in the early 80s, and got an associate degree in industrial electronics. And I was the smartest man on the face of the earth at 22 years old. So I went to work at Terre Haute, Malibu in 1984. And my first day on the job, my boss, his nickname was Bigfoot because he's like 6'8" and bigger than a Bigfoot really would be. And he said, the first day, he said, "Darren, you're going to have to work with Bill. For 2 weeks, work with Bill. He's our top guy. He's our best electrician. He's been here as an electrician longer than everybody else. And work with Bill for 2 weeks. Do everything he tells you. And if you're still alive after 2 weeks, you can be an electrician here." And that was the safety policy. That was it. Survivors got a job. So that was good. And one day, me and Bill are out on the plant floor. And I'll never forget this. We're standing in front of a 480-volt disconnect, 600 amp. So it was big. It was old. So it was big, rusty. And Bill says the following. He says, "Kid, when you turn one of these things on or off, don't stand in front of it. Use your left hand. Stand off to the side. Turn your head. And it might not hurt to duck a little bit." I said, "Why, Bill?" "Well, sometimes these things blow up." "Is it too late for me to be a carpenter or something?" "Yeah, sometimes." "Well, how much they blow up?" "You never know," he said. Anybody else have that class? Receive that same training from a guy named Bill or something? And, well, it was good training. We still do all that, right? Everything Bill told me I would still do today. But the problem was in February of 1984, that was all we knew. That was it. That was the entire arc flash class right there. You know, me and Bill are wearing polyester disco shirts and gold chains. I ain't saying we didn't look good, but would you wear a polyester disco shirt anywhere? But at work, you know, Paisleys, you know, with a Mr. T starter set on, you know. In 1984, that's all we knew. That's all we knew. Just duck your head and you know, pray for the best. Well, you know, hope for the best. Hope is not a very good safety strategy, you know, if that's all you got. Well, a lot of things has changed. And one of the things that's changed is this, NFPA 70E. The things that are in NFPA 70E would have been totally foreign to me and Bill back then. Totally foreign. Standard for electrical safety in the workplace. Everyone needs to implement 70E. No matter what your facility, everyone needs to implement it. If you work at a steel plant, strip steel. If you work at the phone company, if you work for Verizon, if you work for a corn seed company, I don't care. We got industries all over the gamut in here, and everyone needs to implement 70E. Everyone. Okay? Don't do it for compliance. I think I saw an OSHA person a while ago. Don't do it for compliance. Don't do it because you think OSHA requires it. Don't do it because you think OSHA is going to require it. Don't do it because the corporate safety person said you had to. Do it to prevent injuries. And I say it that way because there are ways to implement 70E to make it look like you did it, to make it look like you're compliant. I could walk into your plant and see all the PPE. I could see arc flash labels. I could see all these things. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're preventing injuries. Only if you do it right. Only if you do it with the idea that you're going to prevent injuries. Forget compliance. If you do it to prevent injuries, compliance already happened. Okay? Compliance already happened. So do it to prevent injuries, and it will. 70E will prevent injuries. It's not the law, and that doesn't matter. Everybody circle that. It's not the law, and no one cares. Some people still out there that write checks for 70E stuff, for PPE and what have you, say, nah, we're not going to do it because safety guy, you cannot show me how this is the law. No one cares. Okay? It's not the law, and it doesn't matter. Don't spend 1 second of time at your facility discussing if we have to do this or not. No one from OSHA will ever write you a citation. You bad person, you did not follow 70E. Here's your citation. They won't do it. It won't happen. They don't have to do that because they got their own little thing going on. Okay? OSHA's got a little something called 132, requires personal protective equipment and hazard assessments. 335 requires PPE for electrical hazards. 333A requires specific detailed work practices for working around electrical hazards. But here's the important thing. OSHA doesn't tell you how to do that stuff. OSHA doesn't tell you how to do these things. It just says you better do these things because this is the law. So 70E is how to comply with OSHA. 70E is how to protect your people, and then compliance happens. Okay? So it doesn't matter at all if 70E is in the law. Doesn't matter if OSHA has adopted it yet. When OSHA does adopt 70E in its entirety, nothing will change. They will write you citations now. They will write you citations later. Let's all just prevent the injuries. Then we don't have to worry about citations. And the citations are a drop in the bucket in cost compared to what an accident costs. There was a company in Rotterdam, New York, upstate New York, recycled tire plant. They had an accident several years ago now. Two gentlemen got burned. They were actually replacing a breaker live in a 408 volt circuit breaker panel. Neither one was trained to do this. No PPE. They couldn't justify it. I don't care. If you work at a recycled tire plant, I don't care who owns the plant, you don't have to do that live. Okay? You can't justify doing that breaker change live. And they were doing it live without training, without PPE. Guys got hurt. One of them had to be flown to the hospital in a helicopter. Sounds expensive. The OSHA citation was $14,800. Does anybody know what a helicopter ride to the hospital costs? About $12,000. Yeah, and it's a lot of money. So don't do this to avoid OSHA citations. It makes no sense. It makes no economic sense. Do it to prevent the injury in the first place. Because I swear that injury is going to cost them a lot of money. Medical bills, lost time, equipment damage, business interruption, all kinds of costs. So do it to prevent injuries. And 70 will help you comply. All right? The best thing you can do to protect yourself and other people from electrical hazards is to work de-energized. Turn it off. Me and Bill, in 1984, turned nothing off. We worked everything live. We would never dream about turning something off. Besides, it was a 100-year-old plant. We didn't know where the things were turned off at. Anyway, so, and a lot of it you couldn't. I remember, this is terrible to say, me and Bill had to replace a motor. We had to take a motor out of service. And it was ran by a motor starter that ran like 10 other motors. And they all had to stay running while we did this. There was no disconnect for that 10th motor. You know what we did? Klein linesman pliers, a little extra Scotch 33 tape around them, and Bill counted to 3. He cut one wire and I cut the other one, and then we cut the third one whenever. But we had to cut those first two at the same time, or we'd have single-phased the motor. So that was 1984. If you look around and people are wearing polyester disco shirts and cutting wires that are live, you got a problem. You got a problem. So don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Don't tell my wife I did that either. All right, I would be in trouble. NECplus.org is a great website. It's subscription-based, not us, NFPA. It's a National Fire Protection Association website, and it has the 70E standard in it. You can read it. You can read the last version. You can read the comments. You can read comments on the changes. I live there. I love that website. It's not very expensive, but it's an annual subscription. And this is their words. They say it's the only way to ensure that electrical injury cannot occur. Lockout, tag out. Y'all do lockout, tag out? Y'all do it perfectly? OSHA, always in the top 10. Always. Most cited regulations. Always. And this has been around how long? And we're still not getting it every place. So, lockout, tag out requires training, requires written procedures, requires equipment, things like tags and locks and things to lock out circuit breakers and valves and all kinds of things. Make sure you have a good lockout, tag out program. We can help you with all those things. Electrical safe work conditions. The way you achieve that, the way you turn off a panel and work it de-energized, you disconnect it, you lock and or tag it, depending on the procedure. You test it to ensure an absence of voltage. You test it. You never turn it off and then touch it because you know it's off. It's not off until you proved it's off. It's on until you verified it's not. And then you even have to ground it if you determine it's necessary. And rarely is that a case in a factory, but when you have movable conductors on a utility pole or something, it becomes a thing. This is dangerous. If you have a no live work policy at your facility, love it. I encourage that and applaud you for having one. But do you know that you cannot do no live work policies without first doing live work? OSHA requires us, in some conditions, to work a circuit live. Who's all use a voltmeter to measure voltage? All right, lots of us. Can you do it if it's turned off? If I say, hey, go measure, is that 120 volt receptacle or 277 volt lights, and you go, can you do it? Does voltage leave tracks? No. Current does sometimes, right? That's a fire, that's different. So you have to measure voltage sometimes. Well, when you're achieving electrical safe work condition, recognize it's a hazardous thing. So some people have told us, well, we don't have to do 70E or buy PPE because we have a no live work policy. No, you don't. You have to do live work in order to have a no live work policy. As you're going through the process of turning off a machine, when you disconnect it, when you turn it off, you have to then take a voltmeter and verify it's off. Matter of fact, it's a voltmeter according to 70E that you have to test prior. So you have to go to a known live circuit and test your meter, make sure it's working. Then test the circuit you just turned off to make sure it's off. Then retest the meter. All that's live work. All of that is live work. All of that requires training. All that requires a qualified person. All of that requires PPE. So there's no getting around 70 by saying we have a no live work policy. No such thing. You have to do live work in order to get there. Does that make sense? It doesn't have to, but I swear I didn't make that up. 70E defines the term working on. It's in the definitions section in the front. And it's when you intentionally contact a circuit with tools, with meters, with probes, with your nose, with your hands, your toes, whatever, when you intentionally contact the circuit. It's working on. There's two categories of working on. One is diagnostics. One is diagnostics. All those of you that said you used a voltmeter before, that was diagnostics. Notice the picture in the sketch right here, that person is wearing PPE while they're doing diagnostics. He has to be trained to do this. The other kind of work, the other category is repair. Repair is when you're changing something in the circuit, when you're modifying, like in this case, replacing a fuse. And notice it's got the PPE, that's an insulated fuse puller, and the person has training to do that. Okay?